Good morning and welcome to the Most Powerful Life, April 2017 educational series. I'm Marlene McCallum, your host and the founder of Most Powerful Life. This month, it's my privilege to introduce to you Pascal Brady. Pascal is a senior parent educator and coach, and she's also the founder of Global Life Coaching. There's so much to say about Pascal. I'm going to do a little bit, and then I believe she has some things she'd like to share with you as well. But one thing I'd like you to know is that she is a certified Adlerian parent educator and has been teaching and developing hundreds of Adlerian-based parent education classes and workshops for DC area families for over 15 years. And she does that through the Parent Encouragement Program, also known as PEP, which is located in Kensington, Maryland. Now, Pascal may have something to say about this, but I've always wondered where she gets all of her energy from. And so I have this personal theory that her extensive parent training has given her tools to parent in such a way where she can retain a lot of her personal energy and use it more fully in other areas of life. So my goal for today is that Pascal share her wisdom and training so that you too can harness more of your energy and reclaim it for more enjoyable parenting and for other areas of your life as well, because I don't know about everyone here and everyone who's going to listen to the recording, but for me, parenting can be draining. So one thing I do know is that we're in for a real treat with today's session. Today's session, Positive Discipline 101, Effective Discipline Without Punishment. A few logistics about the presentation itself. Pascal will present for approximately 60 minutes, and then we'll have a dedicated Q&A at the end for about 15 minutes. You are welcome to send questions. We actually had people pre-send questions ahead of today's webinar, so you're welcome to send questions. And we can actually hear you live today if you'd like to share one of your questions live and speak with Pascal directly. Please do that by sending a question through the questions area, and we'll repeat these instructions. So if you'd like to speak live, use the questions area. If you'd like your question read for you, please use the chat area. Okay, so we'll give you that option today. And this session will be recorded, and any key resources that are mentioned today will be included in a follow-up email along with the recording itself. And that's it for logistics. I'll now turn over today's session to our featured speaker. Pascal Brady, welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's Pascal. Thank you, Marlene, so much. Thank you for inviting me today, for having me on. And thank you for all the compliments. I'm blushing here and hyperventilating a little bit. You just put quite a lot of pressure on my back. So thank you, Marlene. I'm delighted to be here. And Marlene has said pretty much everything that's really of note as far as who I am and what I do. I'm a life and business coach. I've been doing this for 13 years now. I have my own business. I call myself the challenge coach because I help my clients transform their challenges into growth and success, and that includes parenting. I also am a certified parent educator with PEP, the Parent Encouragement Program. So PEP is a nonprofit organization that was founded over 30 years ago in Kensington, Maryland, and we are staffed with volunteers. So all of us parents who teach the classes are volunteers who have sat in your seats and have taken those parent education classes ourselves. I started with my now 18-year-old was 2, so I've been at this for quite a while, and loved it so much. It made such an impact on our lives that we then decided to turn around and, well, actually the truth is, I kept taking the classes over and over again until my husband finally said, listen, you got to stop paying for these classes. And so then the only way for me to continue was to actually start teaching them. So that's how I became a parent educator now 15 years ago. And I'm teaching all of the long classes that we have. We have some 8 to 10 week long classes, and then we have a lot of one-time 1 or 2 hour workshops like this one that I'm delivering today. So I'm really here as a representative of PEP today. And I do also, as a result of this, I do a lot of parent coaching and help my clients with their parenting issues. So This is a webinar. I'm usually standing in front of an audience doing this, so you will see that my presentation is very much interactive, asking questions and everything. So as Marlene said, feel free to use the question box or the chat box to ask questions. A lot of you also sent questions in ahead of time, so I'm going to hope that I can answer a lot of these questions. Just so you know, folks on the call have children with ages ranging from 2 all the way to teenagers, it sounds to me, with the bulk being between 4 and 10 years old. And the presentation is really geared to children of any age. It's really about discipline, positive discipline, more than it is about a specific age group in this particular case. The other thing I just want to say before I move on to the actual presentation is that the reason why I do this and why I took these classes, because first of all, I thought parenting was going to come easily. I had wanted children for a very long time when I finally had mine. And I had, pretty good parents and a good childhood. And so I thought it was just going to be a breeze. And it was a complete disaster from day one. And so that's what brought me to these classes. And then I realized that really a 1 hour or 2 hour class or even one book wouldn't do the trick. And so those longer classes that we have, PEP 1, PEP 2, which is basically at PEP 1, PEP 2, or then we have also PEP for toddlers or PEP for teenagers. But those 10-week classes, nothing really replaces that, because you have the benefit of this support group of sorts and of building your knowledge week to week and your toolbox week to week. You go home, you try the tools, you come back, you share how you succeeded or how you failed, and then you keep learning more and building week to week. So nothing really replaces that, and it's been a godsend for me and for many people I know who've taken those classes as well. So I'm hoping that I will answer most of the questions that were posed. There's one in particular that talks about understanding teenagers, and that's, we're definitely going to talk about positive discipline, and that relates to everyone. However, we're not going to talk specifically about understanding teenagers, and that's a very specific 2-hour workshop or 1-hour workshop that we have. We also have the teens class, and I would highly recommend that you guys go to the PEP website, which is pepparent.org, but Marlene will send that in the resources, where you can find the current schedule of classes, which, by the way, the spring classes are starting next week, so this is a perfect time to jump on if you're interested. All right, so let's jump in. So hold on, I'm not very tech savvy here. So this is my family and I. Unfortunately, my husband passed away 6 years ago, so I'm a solo mom for 6 years now of these 2 beautiful teenagers. So the younger one is Eva, and she's 16 years old, and we just came back from an 1,800-mile college tour over spring break. And then the older one, Suzanne, is in college now at Northeastern. And then the puppy here is Bailey, the joy of our lives. So one of the things that I just want to point out when I show these pictures is just that parenting can often be drudgery and hard work and tiring and exhausting, like Marlene was saying before. And it really does not have to be that way. And there is some of these principles that we're going to talk about today, some of these tools and tips that I'm going to give you today, and then many more if you can come to one of the longer workshops, that really transform the way you parent, the way you communicate with your kids, the way your relationship is with your children, and helps make actually parenting and family the way we all probably envisioned it when we first started having children, which was it was going to be fun, it was going to be all fun and games, and then it turns out that they turn 2 or 18 months old to 2 years old, and they start saying no for the first time, and then not doing what you're asking, and then it's sometimes it feels like it's downhill from there. And truly, it does not have to be that way. So that's just an illustration of that. So here is usually an interactive workshop, questions for you. Who likes the discipline portion of your job? And also another question, why is effective discipline so puzzling today? So if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to write them in the chat room or answer the question in the question box. You can wait for a second.
Yeah, sometimes it takes folks a minute to think about what their questions may be. I can answer while we're waiting.
Yeah, why don't you tell me what's one or the other?
Sure. Well, for those of you who don't know, I have a 7-year-old, just to give it some context. So I don't particularly like the discipline part of my job as a parent. I think if I'm tired, I like it even less. I think for me it has a lot to do with bandwidth. And why is effective discipline so puzzling today? Uh, I've never really given that much thought. Well, perhaps because there's so many opinions out there, like
Mhm.
so many ideas or thoughts about how to do it or what to do it. And I personally, I think guilt plays into this question a lot for me. Um, yeah, I think I could expand on that, but I think I'll just leave it at that. I think there's sort of guilt about my daughter and how much time she gets with me and us, and
Yeah,
I think that guilt makes discipline a fuzzy line sometimes.
right, exactly. Yeah, good points, Marlene. So let me delve into some of the answers that we have here about this particular, about these questions, right? So the answer to who likes the discipline portion of your job, typically people in the room say, no, I don't like it, you know, and the main reason for that is that the world discipline really is equated with punishment. And so who likes to punish? Who likes punishment in general for themselves or to give to others? Few people do. And so, but we were raised with this idea that, you know, punishment, that discipline equates with punishment. And the ultimate goal of discipline in the past, if you look back a few decades, 100 years or so, the ultimate goal for children was obedience. The ultimate goal of discipline was obedient. Do as I say because I said so, because I'm the parent, and that's it. No, no discussion. And the only caveat about this today is that it would be much better to not actually have compliant children, because for those of you who don't have teenagers yet, here's a little preview. At some point, they leave the house. They are 14, 15, 16, and they go out into the world, and they are much less interested in being with you, spending time with you. All they really want to do is, you know, be with their friends, hang out with in their circles of friends, and then those people become the circle of influence. Those people become the people that they listen to and they follow. And even before that, you've got them exposed. You know, when you start letting them go to school, etc., they are exposed to other people, other authority figures. You don't want compliant children who will do what people say just because they said so. You want people who think for themselves, who make their own opinions, who are able to defend themselves, who are able to discern right from wrong, make the best decisions for themselves. And so really, obedience is not necessarily the best goal that we should be having for our children. Um, and again, because in that case, children are really not trained to think for themselves and to discern what's best for them or for the world in general, right? So that's that's one of the reasons why discipline is difficult and why we don't like it. Another reason is the environment. You know, there used to be this authoritarian method of discipline that that was the case a bunch of decades ago, and that is still the case in many, many cultures around the world, but definitely no longer the case here in America today, where we live. And so everything that children see, whether it is in church, whether it's on the streets, in the supermarkets, whether it's at school, or in particular in the media, which they are spending a lot of time with and surrounded by, they don't see children being submissive, or in general, submissiveness in general isn't really not being shown anymore. And so it used to be that, you know, if dad said to mom 100 years ago, jump, mom would jump. But dad doesn't say that to mom anymore. It's just like, that would be, you know, unbelievable to hear or see something or witness something like this today in our society. When you watch all the series that are for children on TV, you see kids who are the opposite. They're sassy. They just say what they have to say. Marlene was just telling me how, I hope you don't mind me sharing, how her 7-year-old now, when she has a point to make, says, here are my 3 reasons. You know, they're very argumentative. They give you their reasons. They are used to being listened to, respected, heard, and to have a say in the matter.
And there's this feeling of not wanting to squash that, right? Because there's something really, as a parent, even though I'm technically being disobeyed in that moment, there's also this idea that I don't want to squash her reasoning or
Exactly.
her faith in her own judgment making.
Exactly,
So
right?
how to
So
balance that, Pascal? How to balance that?
hold your horses, we're getting there,
Sorry,
okay?
sorry, okay.
So, yeah, so the United States has gone through all these, civil rights movement, women's rights movement, and a bunch of other movements that really have freed people from submission. And so our kids today are being raised in a society that just does not show that as a model anymore. And again, as Marlene just said, we really don't want that for our kids anyway as they're growing up. So what to do with that? So then the third reason is why it's so puzzling is that we don't have the tools, because we know, I don't know about you, but I'm actually from France, and I grew up in Paris in the 60s. I hate to age myself here, but it was still very much the authoritarian model where and when I grew up. And so say as I do as I say because I said so, and the obedience model. And so that's what I grew up with. And so I really wasn't taught any other way of doing things. And so now when my kid says no, if I can't revert to slapping her or punishing her the way my parents or my grandparents did to us, what do I do instead? And so the movement in America went from being authoritarian discipline, the old method, which is still very prevalent in many other cultures, to then in the 70s, the backlash of permissive parenting, which went all the way the other way, which was all about not hurting kids and not damaging them psychologically, and making sure that we raised happy kids, where the kids had absolutely no boundaries, no limits, and were free to roam and free to do whatever they wanted. And now we're kind of like hanging somewhere in the middle, and we really don't have the tools on how to deal with children today, because we don't know what else we should be doing. So one thing that we want to talk about here is what is positive discipline then, right? So the word discipline, if you look it up in a dictionary, comes from the word disciple, which means following the teacher, following the master. So discipline is really all about teaching, right? It's about education, it's about training. And so what positive discipline focuses on, besides positive, which we're going to talk about in the rest of this presentation, is it focuses on short-term goals and on long-term goals for our children. So here's another question that I typically ask here, which is, what are short-term goals and long-term goals for your children? So if anybody wants to take a minute and write down some thoughts in the question or in the chat box area, we can read them. I'm going to keep going though. So what the short-term goals of parenting are, when you think about it, is really you get up in the morning, you have to get ready for the day, you have to eat, you have to get dressed, you have to get your stuff ready, then you have to walk out the door at a certain time so that you can be where you're going at a certain time, on time preferably, so children at school, parents maybe at work, and then at the end of the day, the same thing in reverse. You go pick everybody up, you potentially go to activities or not, you get home, you have to feed everybody, you have to go through homework, do whatever jobs need to get done in the house at the end of the day, and then you've got to get ready for bed and go to bed. So really life is a series of tasks that need to be accomplished throughout the day in a certain order, preferably as smoothly as possible. And so it's really short-term goals of discipline and parenting is just making sure that we get through these events of the day in the smoothest way possible, in the most harmonious way possible, that we get done what needs to get done. At PEP, we talk about meeting the needs of the situation, right? So that's really what we consider being the short-term goals of discipline. So here's bad news. I don't know if you guys know this, if anybody has ever told you before, but the job of children, the way children grow up, is by pushing the limits, and in particular pushing the parents' buttons. So their job is to test the limits that we set for them. Hence the fact that permissive parenting was not really efficient, because there were no limits to push, and that's led to a whole bunch of other problems. But their job, the way children grow, is by testing out things. So you've got to think of your families as mini labs, laboratories, and your little children as little lab rats who are trying out experiments inside of the house, inside of your families, and that's how they grow, and that's how they fabricate themselves, and that's how they learn about life. So I find that to be really useful perspective, is to think of your family as a lab for your children, and your children being little lab rats trying on things, because then it makes it a little bit easier to take things not so personally when they're pushing those limits that you're trying to set, or pushing your buttons. And again, it is part of their makeup to be born equipped with basically PhDs in our big red buttons. So I don't know about you, but we all have, as parents, 2 or 3 big red buttons, which are the things that are really, really, really important to us, like our most important values as they relate to parenting. You know that you have a big red button in parenting when you ask yourself the question, I know that I'm a really good parent to Suzanne when she's happy, when she's organized, when she's not lying, when she's a good friend, whatever that answer may be, you know that that's one of your big red buttons. And as I said, our kids are born with the ability to just push those red buttons. That's what they do. And since their job is to push the limits and push the buttons to grow and to form themselves, you have to remember that that's what they will do. So they don't really do this for fun. They do this because that's how they grow. That's how they learn. So the classes that we teach at PEP, at the Parent Encouragement Program, are based in Adlerian theory. Alfred Adler was a psychologist, a psychiatrist from the beginning of the century. He was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. They actually went to the same schools, became doctors together, were friends and colleagues in the beginning. So this was, again, Vienna at the beginning of the century. They were hanging out in the same cafes, and they were, creating philosophies and psychologies. And then very quickly, Adler realized that he and Freud had very different ideas about things, and they parted ways. And that Adler went his own way, and he came to America with another colleague in front of his, named Rudolf Dreikurs, Dreikurs. Excuse me. And Rudolf Dreikurs is the person who wrote the seminal book on parenting called Children, the Challenge. Children, the Challenge. So if you are looking for a parenting book, this is your Bible. This is our Bible at PEP. Children, the Challenge by Rudolf Dreikurs. The only issue with this book is it was written in 1964, and a lot of people are put off by the examples and the scenes that he describes in his book, because they're from this older time where people were actually still hitting their kids and stuff like that. So that's kind of a barrier that some people find when they read the book. There is a new series of books that are based in the exact same theory, in Adler's theory, which is the series of books by Jane Nelson, Nelsen, and her book series is called the Positive Discipline book series, Positive Discipline. And originally her book was called Positive Discipline, and then she very smartly then declined it for toddlers and teenagers and parents and educators, etc. But it is a gem of a book, and it is, again, the same philosophy. The whole reason for me telling you this is that Rudolf Dreikurs said this sentence, which is very, very important to remember. A misbehaving child is a discouraged child. A misbehaving child is a discouraged child. So what that means is we have this theory that all of us are come with one overwhelming goal of wanting to belong to the group. We want to belong. We are social beings, and we want to belong to the group. That's our overarching goal. And the way we want to belong to the group is by contributing to the group in a positive way. We want to contribute to the group in a positive way. So the proof of that is when you have your little toddler who is just starting to walk, and he or she toddles into the kitchen, and one of you is making dinner, and the toddler asks you if they can, I help you, I do it. Do you remember those times where they want to make dinner with you, and they want to vacuum the floor with you, and they want to plant the flowers with you, and they want to, wash the windows with you? They want to do everything with you. That's this drive of wanting to contribute positively. So here's what happened. You're in the middle of making dinner, and you are about to leave for this meeting at school or this class that you're going to, and you're in a hurry. And so what you do is you turn around to this 18-month-old and you say, no, honey, go play with your brother. or go play with your sister, or go watch TV. I'll put that TV series on. What did we just do in that moment? We quelched that budding desire of wanting to contribute positively. So what happens to your 18 months old is they go in the other room, but since their goal is wanting to belong, and you just said to them, in essence, you just said, no, really, I don't have time and I don't have the bandwidth right now for you to belong, so just go away. And they're programmed to want to belong. They tried to contribute positively in order to belong. That didn't work, so they go in the other room and they pull the cat's tail, or they hit baby brother on the head with a Lego block, right? So I'm either going to belong and contribute in a positive way, or I'm going to do it in a negative way. But I'm not going to disappear in a hole. I'm not going to just go peacefully, sit in the other room and watch TV like mom just asked to, because then in that case, I would not be contributing, I wouldn't be belonging, I wouldn't be connected, I would feel like I don't belong in that moment. So misbehavior comes from discouragement. I was encouraged, I wanted to contribute positively, it didn't work, so now I'm going to misbehavior so that I'm still feeling a sense of belonging. I know this sounds kind of awkward to people at first when we say this, but it's either going to be the positive or the negative. It's the whole being ignored in the middle. Just kids don't do that, right? So remember that. Again, it is not personal. It's how they grow, and a misbehaving child, and by the way, you can actually extrapolate that a misbehaving person is a discouraged person. They've attempted to do something in a way, they've perceived that they failed, so now they go to discouragement, i.e. misbehavior. Right? So going back to our long-term and short-term goals of discipline. So the short-term goal of disciplines, as I said, is to get through the day in the most elegant, the most peaceful way possible, smooth way possible. And that's going to be impeded by children whose job is to push the limits, push your red buttons, and who sometimes feel discouraged and are going to be misbehaving. Okay? Then the long-term goal of disciplines are these. So again, coming from Adler and from the positive discipline movement, and in particular, an Adlerian lady who's a therapist and a parent educator as well, her name is Betty Lou Bettner. She came up with this way of remembering positive discipline in a very simple way. She developed this theory of the 4 C's. Okay, so the 4 C's are if you can develop these 4 C's, if you can help your children develop these 4 C's, you will have children who are mentally healthy. So these 4 C's equate to mental health. So the short-term goals of discipline should really be helping your children develop these 4 C's. The first one is this feeling of connectedness that we talked about before. We all want to belong by feeling the sense of connection to other human being, right? So that's, and by the way, when we feel connected, this will lead to cooperation. Remember that, that's very important. The second C is, I want to feel capable. I want to feel like I can, right? So I need to feel like I have control over my body, over what concerns me, over my life, right? I want to feel like I have skills. I want to feel like I have skills. I want to feel competent is another way of putting that particular C, right? And again, when I feel capable, then I can contribute my skills. I can contribute to the group. I can get the sense of belonging. The third C is this feeling of counting, of being meaningful, of I matter to the group, I matter to others, right? And that is what leads directly to contribution. And then the last C is the C of I need to feel courageous. Now the problem with the C of courage is it's essentially the most important one, because even if you had a child who was growing up in a very, very poor environment, in a very difficult environment, and who did not have the C of connectedness, the C of capable, the C of counting, because of the environment they were growing in, if somehow they had developed a sense of courage, when you have a sense of courage, you have a sense that you can handle what's coming your way. You have a sense that no matter what comes, you're somehow going to be able to figure it out. You have this little flame inside, this little hope that gives you, again, the courage to tackle whatever comes at you. The problem with courage is that's not something that you can teach. Courage comes by encountering difficulties and then somehow getting through them by yourself and surmounting those difficulties. So that's how you develop courage. Courage is a muscle that we only can develop in the face of hardship by ourselves, right? So I just want to say one word about that, which is what is our role as parents in helping our children develop courage, since we cannot help them develop courage, but what can we do? How can we contribute to the development of courage? And that's where the parenting rubber meets the road. By stepping aside, allowing our children, and we're going to talk about that a great deal more, but allowing our children to make some choices, and then allowing our children to experience the consequences of the choices that they have made. Right? That's where parenting is really, really hard. Why? Because we love our kids, and because we really want to shelter them, and we really want to protect them, and we just don't want to see them hurt and hurting, right? So we want to protect our children. And so when your kid...
Pascal, can I share something?
Yeah, please.
So, when something big happens in the world, and it's so big that people say, I remember where I was when that happened. It made such a mark. I remember where I was when I got that it was more important for my daughter to feel the impact of the consequence of her choice than it was for me to correct it. So she was getting ready. I was in the kitchen, and she was getting ready for school, packing her bag, and it was return library book day, and I saw she didn't have her book. And my instinct was to go get the book and put it in her bag so she wouldn't get in trouble and wouldn't miss it. And I just had this moment. I said to myself that, it's just more important that she forget it and that she feels what that feels like. And it was just like this real, I know, to some folks that may sound very simple, but it was, a light bulb really went off, and out the door she went. And, she came home and she was disappointed she didn't bring her library book. But you know what? She always knows when it's Monday now. She always, we actually made an adjustment to her little list of things to do in the morning. So she writes what day it is, and that tips her off to what she needs for that day. So I did, coach her in how to handle things like that going forward. But she is responsible for returning her library book. So anyway, I remember where I was, what it was. So it was a big moment.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good for you, and good for her. Good for her, for you coming to that realization, having that light bulb come on. And we'll talk about that more too when we talk about consequences in a short while. But this is a great example of how you step out of the way, and you, in this case, you were courageous. You were courageous because you knew in your head, and you had the wherewithal to become aware of what was going on, and then talk yourself out of basically rescuing her from something, and stepping aside and allowing the consequence of the choice, quote unquote. In this case, it was probably more of a mistake, and of this little rat learning when it's Monday, and that it's her responsibility, etc., etc. But that's the only way to develop courage. It really, truly is. So thank you for that. And so these are the long-term goals. This is one way that you can look at the long-term goals of positive discipline. Now, of course, we would also talk here, if we were in a room together, we would also talk about what are your long-term goals for your kids. What do people in the room want for their children? And typically people say, I want my kids to be, independent, responsible, good citizen, kind, compassionate, generous, honest, happy. So there's a whole bunch of things that we want for our children in the long term. And what I like to remind people of is that it's really important that moment to moment, day to day, as you live your life with your children, you try to remember that. You try to remember your long-term goals. Of course, you've got your short-term goals. The short-term goals is to get through the day in the most elegant way possible as you are faced with obstacles of discipline, right? But your long-term goals is really, really what matters, this day-to-day thing. And so I have really good news coming up. I had bad news before about, kids wanting to, misbehaving child is a discouraged child. But the good news is that, so fasten your seatbelt for this one. I'm going to give you the ultimate gift of parenting here, which is that no problem needs to be solved right here, right now. No problem of parenting, no problem of discipline needs to be solved right now. Every single problem can wait. There's only two exceptions to that statement. And if you were here, you would tell me, you would know. The case of health and the case of safety. So in case health and safety always trump all. Obviously, you're not going to allow your 3-year-old, the natural consequence of your 3-year-old running into the parking lot and wait for the consequence to happen. So that, that would be a problem that you solve in the here and now. But other than that, pretty much anything else is something that can wait. And you know why? Because you've got a lot of time. You have, if you have a 4-year-old, you've got another 14 years with this child in your house where they will be able to learn what they need to learn with you in your house. So you have plenty of time. You do not have to solve the problem right now. And so this is really good to know, because if Marlene was saying in the beginning that very often what's difficult for her in the discipline portion of parenting is the bandwidth, being tired, and then when you're tired, it becomes even more difficult. Know that in that case, you can just let it go. You don't have to solve this right now. All you have to do is meet your current needs of the situation. You have to get up, get out of the house, get people where they need to get, go home, have people do what they need to do, and get to bed. That's kind of like mandatory things along the way that you try the best you can to, muddle through. But other than that, learning to put your shoes on today, not mandatory. Learning that you're not really supposed to go to school with your PJs on, it doesn't matter. You can let it slide today. Forgetting your lunchbox, not, you have an agreement with your kids who are in middle school that it's their job to make and remember their lunchbox. They forget the lunchbox. Fine, they will survive. They will figure out a way, right? Not doing your homework today, not doing your homework tomorrow, not doing your homework for an entire week. It's okay. They're just in elementary school. They have another bunch of years before this really starts having consequences, right? And so take a deep breath. This is the Zen of parenting, which is you do not have to solve a problem right here, right now. What you really want to focus on is your long-term goals. And what you really want to focus on when you're in the middle of a discipline problem, it's like 5 of 8 and the school bus is coming at 8 and your kid is still in their PJs and they're flailing on the floor not wanting to put clothes on. You can take a deep breath in that moment and say, do I really need to solve this problem? Do I really need to teach this kid right now that they need to put clothes on before going to school, right? And so the answer is no, you don't. You can just let it slide today and you can deal with it tomorrow, next week, next month. Typically, people react to this and say, well, no, I can't really let my child go to school in their PJs, or I can't really allow my kid to forget their homework or not do homework for an entire week. That has dire consequences. Well, actually, no, not dire consequences for their life. What you're really trying to teach your child here is to take ownership of what belongs to them. And what you really want to teach your child, discipline is about teaching. What you really want your child to learn in those moments is responsibility about what concerns them, and what concerns them is their future. And I usually joke here is talking about the fact that, you don't see very many 28 years old or 20, let's say 23-year-old in college going to class in the morning in their PJs, I can't think of another example right now. But, those things will take care of themselves over time. And again, this is just about relaxing in the moment and not forgetting moment to moment during the day, what are your long-term goals? Is this a teachable moment? Is this so important that I need to go into battle right now about this particular topic? So
I think that's really important too, because I know in my experience what a lot of parents I know struggle with is if you don't have that room to have a Zen moment and say, this doesn't have to happen right now, I'll have another opportunity, then almost every exchange with the child can become one of discipline or correction. And
correct.
So I see the relationship will suffer because of that, because the parent is just so scared that if they don't intervene and intervene and intervene and intervene,
yes.
something terrible is going to happen. But the relationship is suffering.
Correct. Exactly. And so we have this saying, which is connect before correct. Right? As we said, the 4 C's, the first of the 4 C's is connection. You always want to connect before correction. And if you, and then again, fast forward to teenagers, one thing that is really important for parents to know is that once you are in the teen years, all you have left all influence that you have left in the teenagers with your children is through communication. All you have left through the teenagers is communication. That's your only vector of influence. And so the one thing that you do not want to destroy ever, the only way that your children are going to learn from you what they need to learn from you, is if you keep the connection and the communication intact. Right? So that's like fundamental. All right, let's move on because we have 20 minutes left, and I really want to make sure that we get to the, so okay, that's fine and good, but now how do you actually do it then if you don't do it the old way? So here are some of the pieces of the puzzle of positive discipline. And I told you this is a 1 hour talk. This does not replace, a 10-week at 2 hours a week class. But here are some of the things, and we're going to delve into more depth into some of these tools. So the cornerstone here on the top left, as you can see, is encouragement. We're called the Parent Encouragement Program. It's our middle name. It's because parents need encouragement too. Parents need encouragement too. But we'll talk about encouragement at length. Some of the other tools are listening skills, training, consequences, problem solving, redirecting misbehavior, working from strength. That's very important. Firm and friendly. So here are some tools, not all of them, but some ideas, and we're going to delve into some of them in more depth. So the first one is positive discipline is kind and firm. It's one of our buzz sentences, if you will. Are you being kind and firm? So as I said a moment ago, you don't have to solve a problem right in every moment when it happens. You can let go of problems and solve them later. It's very fundamental that you do not solve problems or attempt to solve problems when you cannot do it in a kind and firm manner, which is kind of typically the case, because by the time you've said no for the 10th time, or by the time you've told the kid to put their clothes on, their shoes on, eat their breakfast, do whatever they have to do for the 15th time, you're running out of patience. You are getting slightly irritated, if not mildly frustrated. You are no longer kind. You are angry. You are in a power struggle with your child. You are in fight mode. And so you cannot be kind in that moment. You might still be able to be firm, but you're missing half of the equation. Therefore, you let it go. Because from a place of power struggle, from a place of anger, nothing good comes out. Right? Disconnection, the sea of connection, out the window. The ability to think clearly and establish firm and logical consequences that the child, it will not be a teachable moment for anyone if people in a room are angry. So when there is frustration or anger going on, which again is often the case in parenting, you just let it go. We talk about a power struggle being a tug of war, so and so if you visualize literally two people pulling on a rope, it takes two for the tug of war to be able to happen. So on one side is the parent, on the other side is the child. Yes, no, because I said so, I won't do it, you can't make it, yes, I will, etc. It escalates, it's a tug of war, meaning it's about war now, it's about winning and losing. It is no longer about the problem. Who's the grown-up in the tug of war? The adult. What do? You drop the rope. You get out of the tug of war, you walk out, you go calm down, right? That's how you can remain kind and firm, right? And so, as is said here, kindness shows respect for the child, and firmness shows respect for ourselves and the needs of the situation, right? So let me give you some examples here. Your 9-year-old and your 11-year-old are fighting over what to watch on television. And so a negative way, a non-positive discipline way of handling this would be, John, leave your brother alone. You let him pick a program. You're the older one, you're the more responsible one, plus you always get your way, just let him pick for once. The positive way might be, when you two have decided what to watch, then we'll turn the TV back on. Do you need any help agreeing on something, or can you handle it on your own? Here's another example. Your children are throwing French fries at McDonald's. You've had the discussion on how to behave in restaurants that food doesn't get thrown on the floor anywhere. And so your reaction in that moment could be, stop that right now or you won't get dessert. Or if you throw another French fry, we'll never come back to McDonald's ever again, right? Positive discipline might be, either you can sit in your chair, eat your own food and talk quietly, or we can pack the food up and leave. You decide. And then if another French fry is thrown, you can stand up, you can pack up the food without any further words, and then you leave. Kind and firm. meeting the needs of the situation in the moment, right? Here's another tool of, and I'm not seeing any questions. Again, feel free, anybody, to ask questions or put comments in the chat room if you have any questions. I know I'm moving fast. So encouragement, again, is the cornerstone that I was showing you in that puzzle before. And so positive discipline, if you think about it, is really creating a more positive environment in which to raise your children, in which to have your family life, right? And encouragement is all about, in the word encouragement is the word courage. In the word courage is the word cœur, and cœur in French means heart. So encouragement is about enheartening, giving heart to people. Therefore, a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. A misbehaving person is a discouraged person. It's a person who has lost heart and faith in the fact that they can do things in a positive way, that they can belong, that they can connect, that they feel capable, that they can contribute, right? So encouragement is all about strengthening the positive. It's about, I always talk about watering the flowers in your yard versus watering the weeds. If you water your weeds, you're going to grow the weeds. If you water your flowers, you're going to grow your flowers. Which one do you want to water? Which one do you want to see grow? And so positive discipline is about becoming a yes family, a yes house. Actually, I challenge you, starting today, for a week, mark it in your calendar, to always say yes to your children. So everything that you would normally say no to, you can twist the sentence, put it on its head, and say yes instead. Yes, you can go to your friends as soon as you're done with your homework. Yes, you can play with a hard ball, but it has to be outside in the yard. Inside, you can play with a soft ball. Yes, you can eat a piece of candy as soon as we're done with dinner. Yes, you can go walk out in the street once you are done with the jobs that you have, right? So yes, you can actually go to this overnight party, but you have to convince me first. Okay, you see how you can say yes and you can live in a yes kind of culture. Another thing about encouragement is all about focusing on strengths and focusing on the positive, right? So here's some examples. These are verbal encouragement examples. So a descriptive encouragement is when you simply say to your children what you see them do that is appropriate. So you can use encouragement, verbal encouragement, descriptive verbal encouragement with your children all day long. And I cannot recommend enough that you start doing this, which is really just being a talking mirror, constantly noticing and telling your child without any I in the sentence. It is not about you, and it is not a judgment. It is just noticing what you see your child do. I see you put your shoes on. I see you got up. I see you did your homework, or you did a piece of your homework. I noticed that you worked really hard on this problem. I noticed that you kept running right next to the ball the entire time on the soccer field. This is my Suzanne, my 18-year-old. She was playing soccer when she was 4 and 5 years old, and she had 0 ounce of competition in her. And she would be running next to she was very athletic, and she would be running next to the ball the entire game. She never ever left the ball side. She never touched it either, but she was running next to the ball. So the good news is her team always knew where the ball was. They just had to look for Suzanne. And so the encouragement was, honey, you never leave the ball side. You run so fast. The team always knows where the ball is. They just need to find you, right? So encouragement works even in the face of not blatant success. It is not necessarily loud and excited. It is just factual, right? So it is just noticing and planting the little seeds of self-awareness and self-knowledge inside of your kids. It's a very, very powerful language that all of us would benefit from learning and practicing with everyone, by the way. Appreciative encouragement, that relates to you. When I was driving to the garage the other day, and or tonight actually, I was driving into the garage, and my trunk was full with groceries. And I didn't even have to ask. You came out, you saw that I had groceries, you helped me bring them inside, you put them away, and I was able to get ready for my presentation and leave, and I was on time and prepared. Thank you. That's appreciative encouragement, right? Empowering encouragement is when you stretch you tell your kids what you know about them that they might have forgotten, or that they might not remember, or that they might doubt in the moment. Kids are very much in the moment, and they tend to forget about the past and about their past achievements. And so we have to kind of be their bank account, credit account of all their strength and all the skills and all the things that we've seen them do, and remind them in a moment of difficulty of what we've seen them do in the past. So I know you can do this. I remember last week when we were on the playground and you helped this little kid, you went over to this little child and you helped them get up. You can go talk to your friend. Somebody who goes and helps a total stranger can go talk to your friend, to their friend. I think you can. So those are some forms of verbal encouragement. There is many more nonverbal encouragement as well, but these are some examples. All right. Now we're talking, another piece of the puzzle of positive discipline is how do you set limits, right? So setting limits is very important. And we talked about the fact that positive discipline or democratic parenting is all about setting limits for our children and allowing them to make choices within those limits. So they still have some freedom within those limits, but those limits are firm. They're kind and firm. So what you want is you want few limits so that you can uphold them. You want to pick your battles. And typically our best limits, our most important limits that we should have around our kids are around the things that really, really matter. So typically they're tied to our values. So the things that are really important to us in terms of, it might be work, it might be spirituality, it might be, those things that, health, it might be another one. So you might want to have those fences, those limits around your children be about the things that really matter. And again, to not sweat the small stuff and let that go. And those limits, this fence around your kids is going to change over time. So as your kids become a little bit older and more reasonable, you're not going to have the same fence around a 2-year-old or 4-year-old than you will have around a 10-year-old. Obviously, the fence will expand, right? And then they hit the teenager and it shrinks again. I like to joke about that. So here are some practical ways that you can actually set limits. And those are little tips, if you will, trick words that you want to use. You can use a when-then statement or an either-or statement, and you heard me use some of those before when I was giving you examples. When the table is clear, then you can watch a program. When you've eaten your vegetable and your fruit, then you can have a piece of candy. You can either, take the hardball outside or play with the softball inside, right? You can jump on the old couch in the family room downstairs, or you can sit quietly in the nice leather couch in the living room, right? So these are some of the ways that you can set limits, either or, either or is very important. And ideally what you want to do at the end of these sentences is, comma, you decide, right? This you decide is very empowering, very encouraging. You're putting the choice in the hands of your child. And then you're stepping aside. So typically parents would say here, yeah, but what if you give them choice A and B and then they choose C? Well, choice C is also a choice, right? You have chosen to not pick one of the two choices that I gave you, and that choice C also has consequences. And we'll talk about consequences now. So there are two types of consequences, and natural consequences, logical consequences. Natural consequences is God's gift to parents, I like to call it. So it's the thing that happens when you step out of the way and you allow life to happen without you doing anything. And so, as Marlene was explaining before, you might want to sometimes step out of the way voluntarily, so you kind of have a little bit of involvement, allowing a natural consequence to occur. So if it's the day where you have to return your books to the library and you forget it, then you might have a fine, which of course you would let your child figure out a way to pay for that fine for returning the books late, or they cannot buy a ticket to such and such an activity at school because they have dues or whatever, right? So even if you see, an example I like to give is, it's a snow day today. It's 30 degrees. It has snowed last night. And this elementary school has the policy that you cannot go outside for recess if you don't have a coat, if it's less than 32 degrees. So here's your 6-year-old coming home from school, throwing their backpack in the hallway as they get off the bus and walking in and screaming, saying, this is so unfair. This is school has stupid rules. There was like snow today at recess and I couldn't go out. I was like locked into the principal's office. And you say, oh, honey, what happened? I forgot my coat and they have this stupid rule about coats. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry. I know you love to play in snow so much. What a bummer. We haven't had snow in so long. Yeah, it's really not fair, and I'm just so mad at myself. Say, yeah, I understand. I understand. I wonder what you're going to do next time so you won't forget your code again, right? So the key to a natural consequence is that you don't turn it into punishment, because here's another thing that you could have done when the kid walks in with and throws the backpack and starts screaming, and you would be standing there with your arms crossed, and you'd be looking at them with an amused look on your face, and you'd be saying, yeah, it's not like we haven't talked about your code for the last, 6 months since you've started school, right? Every day, right? Your natural consequence is gone in that moment. You've turned it into a punishment because now it's about you and them and it's about making them feel bad. It is not encouraging at all. So natural consequences, what happens when you don't do anything and you want to step out of the way and allow those to happen, right? So again, that might mean some extreme things. Pet parents are known for allowing their kids to go to school, and that usually happens once, maybe twice in school years, in their PJs or maybe even in their underwear. And the way we make that work, by the way, is your child, your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old refuses, no, that's a bad example, 4-year-old refuses to get dressed in the morning, and you're in this power struggle with them, trying to get them, and then suddenly you remember, what am I doing? This is not my business. The needs here is that I need her to get to school so I can get to work because I have this big meeting with my boss at 9 a.m. and I cannot be late. So you just drop the rope. You don't get into the fight. You say, it looks like you don't want to get dressed today. Let's put your clothes in a bag, and you can choose to put them on in the car or when you get to school. And that's it. So that would be a natural consequence. That would be also sidestepping a power struggle, getting out of it. Okay, very, very powerful learnings. Like Marlene was talking about the fact that now her daughter knows Monday, and she knows when Monday is, and she knows that it's her responsibility. Logical consequences is what we establish together with our children. So logical consequences is really about helping our kids learn what they need to learn. So logical consequences is what we establish together with our children as consequences to action so that they can learn what needs to be learned. It's very important. So again, if you can't discuss, implement, uphold a logical consequence because you're angry, then there is no logical consequence that can be had in the moment, right? Logical consequences are only available when you can be kind and firm as a parent, right? And so the way it looks like is you notice that you have an issue. Say the issue is everybody comes home and dumps their backpacks in the hallway, and then you walk in with their groceries and you stumble and you fall. Or nobody ever puts their toys in the garage from the yard after they play, and so the bikes are getting rusted, the toys are getting ruined, and so you can get angry about that, and you can keep reminding and nagging and probing and etc. Or you can say nothing for a while, put them away, deal with the situation the best you can, and then on Sunday morning after breakfast, you can say to everybody, "Hey, everybody in the family, please come. Let's just sit down on the couch. I want to talk about something." And then you can say, "We have an issue. There's things that are being left in the yard in the evening that get damaged and rusted, and sometimes when we drive in we don't see them, and then we drive over them and we break them. So we really have this problem. How do you guys see that?" And you have everybody give their opinions about how they see that, and you say, "Well, would you help us solve this problem? How could we solve the problem?" And you brainstorm with your kids a solution on how to solve the issue. You can start doing this with children as young as 4 years of age. I mean, some a little bit earlier, some a little bit later, but you can start involving your children in problem solving very young. and you really should, because you get into the habit of doing this with them. And you involve them, because all of these things are just, when you think about it, again, this is a lab, they're learning, and this is just all about problem solving. And so you want to ask them for their help. And they, remember, they want to be connected to you. So in the moment where you sit down on the couch and you have the talk, you're connected. They want to feel capable and developing skills. You're allowing to do that. And they want to feel like they contribute and they count in the family. And that's what you're asking them to do in that moment, right? So you are developing 3 of those 4 C's in the moment of involving your kids in problem solving with you. And you will be amazed at the results that you get by involving your children in being cooperative with you in problem solving. And it can be problems that concern them, but it can be problems that concern the entire family. And it's always good to have family meetings with everybody, even though it might be just one kid with one problem, always the recurring problem, because nothing replaces that brainstorming of everybody bringing up ideas. So these are logical and natural consequences. And then one last thing, and we're basically done, so I'll go over this quickly, is training. And that's something that we often overlook. They're little rats in the lab. They need to learn things. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember how I learned the things that I learned. I don't remember how I learned to brush my teeth. I don't remember how I learned to take a shower, how I learned to get dressed, how I learned to organize a project that was due in a month at school. I don't remember how I learned to, hold my fork and knife and cut a steak. But the thing is, somebody must have taught me. Somebody must have broadened that really in small steps and actually taught me. And so we really need to make the time for training, break things down in small steps, and ongoingly have training sessions ongoing with our kids. So when your 11-year-old girl or 12-year-old girl, sorry for the sexism, comes into your office and says, "Mom, where's my dress that I was going to wear at the banquet tonight? How come you didn't wash it? I can't," and you go, honey, looks like you really want to learn how to do we really need to teach you how to do your own laundry, because we're starting to have clothes issue, right? So follow the clues of your kids and follow what they're interested in, and try to, stay ahead of the game and constantly be teaching them a new skill. So this is the C of capable. Constantly be teaching them a new skill so that they are learning things. You're teaching them to become independent. They can then contribute their skills to the rest of the family and to the greater community, and you will help them feel more competent and skilled, right? So last words, very important. You always want to focus on the problem rather than on the person. So it is never about you slob. I can't believe when you eat there's like crumbs all over the floor. You're the only person in this family like this, right? There is no you. There's no labeling. That's the curse of parenting. I don't know if each one of you thinks of one message that they've internalized from growing up, from the adults around them when they were growing up, when somebody was tell them, "You are so something," and it could be a good message or it could be a bad message, but it's something that you've internalized, and that is really not helpful for our children to grow up with. We want to use encouragement, plant the little seeds of what we see them doing and being inside of them so that they own it, but we don't want to focus on the people and on their defaults. We want to always just be in problem-solving mode. Again, noticing the positive and focusing on the strength. We've talked about that at length. Definitely allowing your child to contribute, count through jobs, sharing their competencies, their acquired skills to the family and then the greater good. And have family fun. And the family fun portion of things is what we started with when Marlene introduced the talk, which is all about bringing back fun in the family. Because if you don't solve every single problem every time it happens, if you step out of power struggles, if you focus on building encouraged and cooperative children, you will have a much more much more fun family, a much more encouraged family, and people who, as I had told Marlene when she was asking me about how to talk about this talk, kids who are happy to come home, to tell you about their day, who are happy to come to the dinner table and share what happened today, and listen to what you have to say, by the way, who will be happy to go on vacation with you, who will be happy to come home from college to you, That's the ultimate goal of positive discipline.
Nice. I have a quick question about allowing your child to contribute to the family through jobs and sharing of ideas. Is there a is I don't know, is there a time cap on that? Is there a window, or if you do this powerfully, will you have a child that even as a teenager still wants to contribute in this way?
Okay, so you mean a cap where at some point they won't want to contribute anymore. So you have a window of opportunity that runs out?
Yeah, I guess that is my question. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, no. This is something that it's much better if you don't squelch it when they're 18 months old and they come into the room and they ask to help you, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you ride that wave and you continue riding that wave ongoingly, it's helpful, and it's then easier to continue riding the wave. If you start when they're 14 and you've never done it before, they're definitely going to feel like you're imposing on them and you're now suddenly, changing the rules on them. But nonetheless, we talk about the fact that it is never too late. So in our teenage class, class for parents of teenagers at PEP, we have parents who come for the first time to this, and they have kids who are 17 and 18, and they can still learn things in that class that will transform the way their kids react. So there is no cap on this cooperative window. And it's just the way you frame it in the beginning. So if people leave a parenting talk like this, go home, and the next morning the kids wake up and say, you know what, I went to a class last night and I learned that you need to contribute. So I've put a list on the refrigerator, and from now on you're not doing anything fun until you've marked everything off that list. That's not going to go over well if you've never done this before with your 7-year-old. So what you want to do is you want to sit down and you want to start family meetings again, and you want to start, problem solving. And one of the problem is, oh geez, you're getting so big, and you're getting, when you were tiny, you had a tiny wardrobe, a tiny appetite, a tiny calendar, a tiny social life, everything. And now you're like this big girl, and you have all this appetite which has grown, and your social life, and the things that you have to do, and your clothes, and everything has grown. And there's only just one of me, and I can't do it all by myself. And I completely miss the boat of the fact that you can do so many more things by yourself now. So we need to somehow reshuffle the whole, job list here in this house. We need to sit down, see everything that needs to get done in the house, and see how much, what kids can do, what parents can do, and how we can, redistribute job sharing in this family, because we just cannot, mom and dad just can't keep doing it all by ourselves.
So one thing I get from this type of training, because discipline is training, right? Discipline is teaching. That's one of my big takeaways. But we're actually setting up children to relate to problems as opportunities.
Exactly.
As like their life skill.
Exactly. So another thing I wanted to say before I forget is another portion of the answer to your previous question is we typically talk about the fact that by age 12, children are developmentally ready to basically be independent human beings. So by age 12, you could theoretically have a kid live on their own and be capable of doing all the basics like finance, hygiene, responsibility outside of the home, pet care, house and yard care, all the basics. They are capable by age 12 of having learned all these things, right? So when I found that out, when I was taking my pet classes, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm a little behind the curve here. I better get with the program. And so if you Google responsibilities by years of age, you will find they have that all over Google. The list of responsibilities that kids can do at each age. You've got to be very careful with that, because some kids are behind for certain things, some kids are ahead for certain things. So it's just a good guideline, to look at. And again, very often an eye opener, because here's another thing that Dreiker said. He said, never do for a child what a child can do for themselves. All right, never do for a child what a child can do for themselves. And so that means that as soon as you see your kid putting their shoes on for the first time, or their coat on for the first time, or pouring their milk and their cereal for the first time, you will no longer do that for them ever. And if they ask, and so then what happens is, remember, they're there to push the limits and push the buttons, and they want to be connected with you. And so they're going to say, Mom, can you please put my milk in my cereal? And you say, no, honey, I saw you do this by yourself last week. I'm done with that job. You can do it yourself now. No, but Mom, please do it. I can't do it. I'm going to spill it again like I did last time. And you will stay firm and friendly, and you will say, no, I know you can do it yourself. And then eventually you will leave the room and no longer entertain that conversation.
Well, Pascal, what do we do with all these questions? We have so many great questions, ones that you've answered, if not directly, but given people tools to practice. Should I pick a few to?
Sure, that would be
Okay.
great.
Okay. I've never seen this many questions come through pre-webinar. So also for the folks who are on the line, if you want to take this opportunity and send in some questions right now, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm going to pull from this list where people registered. So one came in sort of towards the end, and this one involves hitting. So she didn't include the ages, but I believe, I know her, so I believe the ages are 3 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And her current biggest parenting problem is the kids hitting each other. And the one thing she'd like to get out of the session is what to do or say when they're hitting each other.
So there's multiple answers to that question.
Yes.
The one of the aspects of the answer to this question is sibling rivalry. So if it is mutual, if the 3 hits the 5 and the 5 hits the 3, then you have mutual sibling rivalry. But even sometimes it's one way and constantly the same way. It could be the 3 hitting the 5 or the 5 hitting the 3, and it's always like that. It doesn't matter. It's called sibling rivalry, and we have a 2-hour talk on that. And the conclusion of the talk basically says it's none of your business. They do it for mostly for parental attention, and so because it is negative behavior, what, as we talked about today, what you want to do is you don't want to contribute to negative behavior by paying attention to it, and so you would just leave it alone. And so you would set your limits around this depending on what your own private limits are. So in my house, it was blood and bones, and so if there was blood and bones, people could come talk to us about that, and we would take care of the blood and the bones. But if there were no blood and bones, this was none of our business, and we encouragingly send the children back to their issue and say, you know, we've seen you dealing with things like that positively before. We've seen you solve your own problems before. We know you can. Go figure it out, right? Or if another limit was the pitch of the volume. So if the pitch became too high, the fight needed to be taken outside. So you can do this, but you have to do it outside. Remember, inside we have harmonious or a certain level of volume. So that's one way. The other way is if you do have, it will be, most of the time, it will be sibling rivalry. So that this will apply almost universally. Nonetheless, if you say you had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and the 1-year-old wasn't able to defend themselves, what you want to do is you'd want to remove, again, not giving the misbehavior some attention. You would want to remove the 1-year-old so the 1-year-old would not get hurt. So without saying a word, without giving any attention to either thing, you would remove the 1-year-old. I'm assuming that you would have, at that point, you would have already said enough times to the 3-year-old, we don't hit, we don't behave like this, etc., etc. And then later, when everybody's calmed down, at bedtime, for example, after story time with your 3-year-old, you might have a conversation saying, you know, you were really frustrated again today. You really wanted that little brother of yours over the head. I wonder if there's, you know, I wonder what you're feeling that moment. I wonder what else you could do in that moment, you know, so you can problem solve at a later time with them if you feel like there's a little bit more maybe than just sibling rivalry to it.
Great, thanks. That's a pretty thorough answer for not having a lot of details. I know that if you had more, or maybe not, maybe you don't need more details, but I think it really speaks to your wisdom and training, Pascal, that you can kind of dig in and give so much from, you know, pretty basic details. I have another question. This one is interesting because it approaches the parent relationship, so the spousal relationship. And so this one is any advice on how to co-parent with a spouse who approaches parental duties through a lens of obligation and responsibility versus happiness. So I was curious about, it's pretty meaty, curious about your thoughts on that.
Right. So what I usually answer when we have parental questions like that in our talks is, this is parental counseling. This is a couples counseling, and this is, you know, it's not really. So it's kind of a little bit of a glib answer, which is nonetheless really the true answer, which is that if you cannot have a conversation with your spouse, a true, honest, authentic, transparent conversation with your spouse about that issue, then maybe it would be useful to have somebody else help you have that conversation with your spouse. If it impacts, you know, both parenting, i.e. the children, and or the family life
Yeah.
in a way that's significant, that really is having a negative impact on people on the day-to-day basis. So that might require some external help. If not, and or if you're able to have this conversation, it is really important, because that's one of the things that you're not being told before you have children. Is, you know, it's really important to sit down with your significant other before you have children, and that you talk about these essential things. What is your parenting style? What do you envision? What are your expectations? What are your assumptions? What's your style? How would you like things to look like? You know, what are your values? What are the things you want for your kids, your long-term goals, etc.? Have these conversations, and it's never too late. So if you haven't had that conversation, now is not a bad time to have it, right? So this is, by the way, forbidden on date night. Date night is for fun, but you can have a parental business meeting with your spouse and say, you know what, we really have some issues here. I think we need to sit down. We should have had this conversation a long time ago, but we really don't see eye to eye. And here's, you know, here's what I want. What do you want? Here's how I see things. How do you see things? How can we somehow meet? Because a lot of parents come to us that are separated, divorced, whatever. And so our answer is actually a very hopeful answer, which is it's not ideal, but it really doesn't matter if you have two people parenting in a very different style, because kids know who they're dealing with. They're very, very smart, and they know which style to expect from whom. And the other thing is, Adlerian parenting is extremely attractive and very compelling to children. So children tend to gravitate towards this positive discipline type of parenting, because it is respectful, because it is growing them. It's the high road of dealing with people. So kids will gravitate towards that anyway. I'm moving away from your question, which is, how do you make somebody else happy about parenting who's not? I guess my answer would be, do those things, do positive discipline, and you will see that you will start having a family that is no longer a family of drudgery, and then it will bring fun back in the family. You know, so my husband, who was 20 years older than I was, and who really was not interested in any of these things, was actually not really that keen on having kids again after his first family, didn't want any part of this. And when I started bringing Pep home, he just would say, okay, just go do your thing, but just, you know, leave me alone with this. And then, so I finally realized I had to do this by myself, and I did. And I started implementing these things, and it started having a profound impact. And that's what turned him around eventually to come to the principles and to come to some of those, you know, problem-solving discussions, etc. Because it started being wonderful again. You know, I mean, when we have these family meetings and kids appreciate their parents, and he got appreciated for the first time for certain things that he was doing for the kids, he had never heard that before. I got him actually crying, you know, and so it just brought a totally different dimension to the family. So that's one way where you might be able to turn somebody around.
Excellent. I think that's a terrific place to start. You know, what I hear is actually acting your way into
Exactly.
a new way of being, as opposed to addressing what's not working, or you know, there are different directions to transformation, and sometimes, you know, we can start with the actions.
Actually, this is an Adlerian concept. I don't know if you knew this, Marlene, but Adler is the one who coined the term acting as if.
Oh, is he? Okay, I
So
didn't know that.
fake it till you make it comes from Adler, and so
Oh,
exactly what you
I
just said.
borrow from him all the time. See that? I had no idea. Now I know who to attribute it to. Um, well, thanks. You know, I think most of the other questions were covered in the tips and suggestions and pieces of the puzzle that you shared. And if you would like to share this slide with folks, we'll include this in the follow-up as well. But if there's anything specific here you'd like to say about PEP, I'll give you a minute to do that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, really, as I said, pepparent.org, and actually I think, no, it's at the bottom there. Pepparent.org is where you see the catalogs of classes. Spring classes are starting next week. We have classes that are organized by quarter, so we'll have a summer quarter after that, etc. The next class that I'm teaching at PEP starting this coming Friday actually is a positive psychology class. So this is actually not a parenting class. It's a class based in Martin Seligman's authentic happiness work. And it is a class that helps people become happier and more positive and more resilient. So it's really addressed to adults. And it's an in-person class in Kensington on Friday mornings from 10 to 12. And I'm happy, my website, I don't think I put it anywhere actually, I forgot, and we can include that in the
I
follow-up.
will.
But it's
I'll make sure to.
Pascal Brady at thechallengecoach.com, and I'm happy to answer any further questions about this or PEP or parenting in general that people have.
Thank you. So just a quick thank you to everyone who attended today, to everyone who registered and is going to listen to the recording at a later date. Thanks for attending the Most Powerful Life educational series. A big, big thank you to today's presenter, Pascal Brady. So appreciate your time, and you know, the proof is in the pudding. I know both of your daughters, so it was when I thought about who I wanted to invite to give this talk, it was a very easy choice for me.
Thank you very much. That does touch me very much that you asked me and that you think that of my daughters. It's very very moving. So thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And just a closing word. Again, this is Marlene McCallum, founder of Most Powerful Life. This is a coaching firm that specializes in supporting self-employed and small business owners through private coaching, group coaching, and through bringing in industry experts like Pascal and like others to provide support and training and wisdom for your extremely full lives. And if I can be of any assistance, please email me at marlene@mostpowerfullife.com, and we will catch you at the next educational series. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Marlene.
Thank you.